Testing 1, 2, 3.
I'm good.
Got it. Good morning. On behalf of Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead, the Commission, Manager Fuentes, and staff, welcome to the business meeting of the City of Truth and Consequences, the City Commission. It is now 9 o'clock on May 24th. If you have anything on your person that makes a sound, could you please shut that down? It would be appreciated. Can we please have roll call?
Honorable Steve Green.
Here.
Honorable Sandra Whitehead.
Here.
Honorable Kathy Clark.
Here.
Honorable Ralph Heschler.
Here.
Honorable Joshua Frankel.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, we have quorum.
Thank you very much. Please join me in 15 seconds of silent meditation. Thank you very much. Commissioner, Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead, could you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I would need a motion, but in that motion, I would ask whoever makes it to pull H6 off of the agenda. I will stand for a motion.
Excuse me, Mayor. I'd also ask that we move consent calendar number 1 to a standalone, and that it be noted that when it comes to executive session, that I will be recusing myself from the discussion on geothermal water.
Okay, so I just make sure, Commissioner Clark, that I understood you. You want number 1 on the standalone, the City Commission
Yes,
regular meetings?
that's because I wasn't there.
Okay, April 25th, 2017. Okay, so would someone like to make a motion, please?
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the agenda with pulling H6 and on F1 consent calendar, putting F1 Commission, City Commission regular minutes, April 25th, 2017, as a standalone, and in executive session to please note that Commissioner Clark will be recusing herself.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second.
Second.
Tie for second on the right side of the dais. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Next item is C, comments from the public. It's a 3-minute rule. If you have anything that you'd like to make as a permanent part of the record of this business meeting, please put it in the black box that's next to the microphone. Address us, the commission, with your name, your address, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. My name is Beverly Terflode. I live at 170 Juniper Avenue. I am here representing the Sierra County Tennis Association. Margaret Spears, President, Buddy Harrelson, Vice President. There's been a little controversy in that there was a new lock put on the tennis courts, which denied us access on numerous occasions. So we are asking that responsible members of the association or other responsible adults have a key to access. My understanding is there's been no vandalism over an 8-year period. For the most part, prior to about 3 weeks ago, the Tennis Association has really been brushing the courts, maintaining the nets, tying up the windshields and so forth, and taking care of the weeds. Now there's a controversy about an overuse of electricity for the lights. We are asking that there are no fees levied for that. We feel that in terms of, all the other parks and rec facilities, we are costing the absolute least. We feel that there's been possibly some error in the bill, because the lights have probably only been on about 6 or 7 hours up until, this point. We had made a request to be put on the agenda, and then someone made the decision that the issue was resolved and took us off the agenda. So that's a bit of a concern to us as well. Thank you for your time and consideration. We hope you can resolve this. We do believe that there needs to be signage at the tennis courts about where tourists in particular and children can get a hold of the key to have access to the courts without a lot of bureaucratic paperwork. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And a request to be put on the agenda again for if there is not resolution to the problem.
Anyone else like to address the commission?
Good morning, Commissioners. Ron Fenn, 316 North Foch, Truth or Consequences. Today I have a little demonstration for you. This demonstrates what you all know about the finances of the city. It's a very nice little picture of a hotel at night. That's what you see. That's what the information that you receive. If you look a little further, wow, it looks a little bit bigger, more handsome. However, what you don't see is the raging fire that's bearing down on this wonderful hotel. And that's what's going on with the finances of the city. I brought this to the attention of PUAB the other day, and that is the fact that there are several communities that signed PPAs, power purchase agreements, with cities in New Mexico. Mr. Fuentes is as the lead negotiator for this, negotiated us into the worst, most costly solar purchase agreement in the state. I have a little chart here showing that over the 25-year period, we will be spending $2.47 million more than other communities that have solar. Why is this being done? Well, I don't know, except that I find also that Walmart, who signed the organization SSA number 3 solar, was formulated before the TRC one. So, but TRC built their solar farm before Walmart. I believe that Walmart was being subsidized in part by the citizens of TRC. And there's ample reason to believe that. Also, Mr. Bittinger of Florida, the owner of these corporations, or these limited liability companies that run the solar farms, is another Florida developer who resembles in a lot of ways the former Greg Neal. Look into these things, please. One other thing, the citizens of Truth or Consequences have to pick up the bill for $36,000 a year for the taxes on the solar farm, while we collect $2,500 in rent, on top of paying the highest prices for solar in the state and paying more than we paid for Sierra Electric Co-op. So you tell me how anything in this is green or savings when the poorest community in New Mexico pays the highest price for solar. Thank you, Mr. Fuentes. You folks need to look into these.
Anyone else like to address the commission?
Good morning, Commissioners and staff. I have two issues that I would like to present to you. One is, at your last meeting, you attempted to appoint the city manager to the hospital board, to the governing board. I believe that 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 is not in the commission's best interest. I believe if necessary, you could certainly make a temporary appointment until you have found a replacement for what I understand now are 3 resignations from the city of Las Cruces, the city of TLC. But I think it is not in your best interest to split the loyalty of your city manager between the board of the hospital as a voting member and the loyalty to the city commission. Because once Mr. Fuentes votes on that board, he becomes a part of that board and partially responsible for any vote that is taken. And I think that is not in the best interest of your appointment to the city manager's position. So I think you know, as I said before, I'm not opposed to a temporary appointment to fill vacancies until such time that you have been able to select applicants to that board. The other item that I would like to bring to your attention, Commissioners, is that to the best of my knowledge, there has been no public input on the but I've got Alzheimer's, I guess, on the preliminary budget to the PSC. And I think that is not, again, not in the best interest of, I was here at the public work session, but no input was taken from the public, and I believe I was the only one here. And let me assure you that I would have had some comments, and one of the comments that I really think you need to look at is the amount of property taxes collected here in the city. That is less than in Elephant Butte. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like?
Good morning. I'm Linda DiMarino on behalf of Main Street Truth or Consequences. First off, I would like to say thank you for your support of the Hot Springs Festival. I don't have all the numbers yet of, I'll come back to you when I have them, of occupancies in the hotels and also visitors to the Geronimo Trails Visitor Center. But really, over the past 2 years, developing this has really increased those numbers significantly, so we're really happy about that. So thank you for your support of that. Just to let you know a couple things we're working on. We have 4 different grants that are in with some of the governmental freezes that are on right now. We won't know about those until those freezes are taken off. But some of those look pretty positive, so those are exciting. And another thing that we had worked on last year with New Mexico Main Street was Rich Williams. I spoke with him last week, and we had applied for Great Blocks last year, and then the funding was cut, so they had originally intended to identify 2 communities, and they were only able to identify 1. He has actually told me that they are looking to try to find more money for this year upcoming so they can do an even larger area in the Great Blocks grant. And I think, you know, it might have been a good thing that if they can find that money, it might have been a good thing that we didn't get selected last year. So anyway, that's all for now. Thank you very much.
Anybody else like to address the commission? Seeing none, we will move on. Thank you for your comments. Item D, response to public comments. Any commissioner want to respond to anything that we heard today? Commissioner Eschler.
Thank you, Mayor, if I may. I'd like to address the Tennis Association real quickly. First of all, thank you for being here, and I apologize for you not being on the agenda. I think that might have been an oversight, and, it wasn't purposefully done. We had thought that we had rectified the situation, but perhaps we didn't. Hopefully, I'll offer a couple of solutions today, and we can move on from there. Just a little bit of history. On March 28th, we met on, regarding fees for the city. And prior to that date, on the fee schedule, the tennis courts were actually $5 a day and $5 a night. We made that change to take the $5 a day fee off, and we made the determination that we should keep the $5 a night in order to pay for the electric uses. I can see that now. We may want to change that, but here's some recommendations that I would like to make. By the way, the Gene Spear complex is a very nice tennis court. You should really appreciate it. Sorry. First of all, I'd like to see, and I'll give these notes to Gloria, our park manager. First thing, I'd like to see the netting rehung, maybe restitched. Additional signage indicating uses or non-uses at the tennis courts, or for racket sports only, or no skateboarding, etc. Some of those things. I don't know what else we need to do there, but some additional signage would be good. I'd like to see the padlocks removed to allow daily play unobstructed. It looks like it's an unwelcoming situation, and I'm not sure why we have the padlocks on there. I'm sure that in the past we've had some vandalism, and that's usually why we lock things up. But I'm hoping that we can now maybe trust the public and at least try it and see and make that place more welcoming. Clean up the access from 4th Street entrance, eliminate the tripping hazard. You have a nice wall there and a sign, and then you have an arch and a gate, but there's like a 12 to 18 foot step. And if somebody sees that sign that's not familiar with it, that's going to be a tripping hazard or an issue. We could either fix that or close that entrance off completely and allow people to access from the 3rd Street side, where there is another sign, and that way we wouldn't have to worry about that tripping hazard. Come up with an amicable solution allowing reasonable access to the lights at night. A couple of things that I've thought about were maybe put a drop box there on site to turn the key in. Maybe considering installing a timer on those lights, so that people can use it after hours, and the timer would turn those lights off automatically after an hour use. Then you'd have to reset them. That way, if somebody maliciously turns those lights on, we know that they're going to be off after an hour anyway. So we could do something along those lines. And of course, we'd ask the police department to do additional security checks in that area. If the lights are on, just do a drive-by and make sure that nobody's up to mischief, but it's actually the tennis courts are being used for what they're supposed to be used for. The other thing I would like to see is on the 3rd Street side is maybe placing some parking bumpers parallel to the tennis court itself, so people know where to park and how to park, to organize that in case they do have some events there. That's about it for me. So I'm hoping those suggestions meet some of your needs. If not, please contact me personally by phone later on, and we'll try to work with you more. Thank you very much.
Mayor?
Yes, Commissioner Clark.
Yeah, I'm going to play off of Commissioner Heschler's. You spend a lot of work working on our tennis club, Jill.
And he doesn't even
Right, you don't even play.
You
Good.
didn't want me to play this.
Well, Beverly got me out once, so I got to give her credit for that. But my feeling is that this tennis club has been the outfit that's taken care of those courts.
Yes.
And I believe that they should have 24-hour access to them if they felt like playing at 2 o'clock in the morning. And maybe something that we could consider is a code lock that the tennis club members would have, and that out-of-state people could get from the city clerk and or after hours somebody at the tennis club, so that they would have access also. And my question about the lights is something that we've talked about before, but if we're paying for lights at Armijo Park, why are we not paying lights for our tennis club people? So we may want to reconsider that. And I also apologize for not being on the agenda, because you're definitely entitled. Hot Springs Festival, Linda, I want to say thank you very much. It was probably the best attended that I've seen so far. And I also know for a fact that there wasn't a room to be found downtown. And that had to do with the Hot Springs Festival, so that was good. And I know we'll get to this question a little bit later, but I do have the issue of loyalty with our city manager being on both the hospital board and the city manager position. But I also know that the hospital is owned in part by the city, and the city is responsible for its integrity and its financial health. And so with that in mind, I appreciate your comments, Mr. Klaus. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, anyone else have any?
I'm Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I think to the folks for the from the Racket Club, first of all, let me apologize because this issue falls under my shoulders, and I wasn't. It fell behind. Was behind the ball on this issue, so definitely I will be meeting with staff and address your concerns because it is my responsibility as the city manager to address all your concerns, and I apologize for not doing so in a timely manner. In regards to the issue of loyalty, I can assure you, Mayor, Commissioners, and the public that my loyalty is for the interest of the city, whether it's representing, being a member and representative as an ex officio member of the hospital board, or as an appointed member on the governing board, should the commission do so. Again, because of the loan that we have for the new hospital, it is critical that we oversee it and that we look out for our interest, since we are part owners of not only the hospital, but of that debt. And this is not in no way meant to be a permanent, but it is something that needs to be done in the interim until some issues are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. I would also just like to suggest to Mr. Heschler that list that rather going to Gloria should go to the city manager, so we don't, it doesn't appear that the commission is bossing staff around, which we do not have that.
Not a problem, Mayor. Thank you.
In our job description. Thank you very much, and thanks for all the comments. Appreciate that. The next item is presentations. These are always the smile part of the agenda. But before we go into the proclamation for Law Enforcement Appreciation Week, I believe the chief has brought some new team members with him that he'd like to have the opportunity to introduce to the commission and to the public.
Good morning, Mayor Pro Tem and Commissioners. Happy to report the police department is fully staffed. We have a couple officers that are out who are on vacation. One is out of state and worked graveyard last night. But at this time, I'd like to present 3 of our new officers. They're all from our local community. Were raised here, and we have put them through the academy. They have graduated. They have done an excellent job in the academy, and we're very proud of them. I'd like to introduce Officer Jacob Jones. Stand up, please. Matt Socolo and Rafael Marin. These are the 3 of our newest. We're very proud of them. We're happy to have them with us. Jacob Jones and Rafael Marin graduated last Thursday. I had extremely great comments from their staff. Matt graduated several months back, and the same. They were very appreciative of how well focused our folks were. We're proud to offer these opportunities to our local folks, our young folks that have a desire to go into law enforcement. So we're happy to have them. So I'd just like to introduce them to our council. And you see our other staff here as well.
Thank you. Welcome. So the next item is the proclamation, and before I turn that over to Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead, my wife works as a volunteer on Wednesdays at the SJOA kitchen, making the meals, preparing the meals for the Meals on Wheels program. Last week she came home and said, "You'll never guess who's volunteering at SJOA doing the same job that I do, but it's on Tuesday." I said, "I give up. I'm not even going to guess. I have 6,435 names I could pull out of the phone book probably and guess." And she said, "Well, I'll make it easy for you. How about Sandy Whitehead and the police chief?" So I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem and the chief. Volunteerism is a DNA quality that you can't buy. Either you have it or you don't have it. And thank you for going beyond and serving our community. So with that, I felt it was appropriate that Mayor Pro Tem handle this part of the meeting. It's yours.
Well, thank you, Mayor Green. And it gives me great honor and privilege today to present the proclamation from the City of Truth or Consequences, and I will also be reading the proclamation from the Secretary, or from the Governor of the State of New Mexico. But before I read that, I want to read a little bit of history regarding the proclamation for Law Enforcement Appreciation Week. A background. In 1962, President Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the calendar week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week. Established by a joint resolution of Congress in 1962, National Police Week pays special recognition to those law enforcement officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty for the safety and protection of others. National Police Week is a collaborative effort of many organizations dedicated to honoring America's law enforcement community. During the week of May 15th, our TRC Police Department held activities in honor of National Police Week, and we felt it was more than deserving to proclaim a week in honor of our appreciation of our law enforcement. First and foremost, to our Truth or Consequences City Police Department, and extended to the Sierra County Sheriff's Officers and the New Mexico State Police Officers. Attached is also the proclamation by the Governor for Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Day, proclaimed on May 24th, 2017, which I will now read, and then I will read the proclamation from the City of Truth or Consequences. State of New Mexico, Executive Office, State of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Proclamation. Whereas the dedicated men and women in law enforcement who protect and serve the citizens of the State of New Mexico deserve our utmost respect and appreciation. And whereas in New Mexico, 206 law enforcement officers have made the ultimate sacrifice, giving their lives in the line of duty. And whereas it is important for all citizens to recognize the risks faced by our law enforcement officers who work to protect our families, homes, and communities by enforcing our laws. And whereas it is important for all citizens to honor those who have made the ultimate sacrifice with a day of remembrance. Now, therefore, I, Susana Martinez, Governor of the State of New Mexico, do hereby proclaim May 24th, 2017 as Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Day throughout the State of New Mexico. Signed at the Executive Office this 11th day of May, 2017, by Susana Martinez, Governor, and attested by Maggie Toulouse Oliver, Secretary of State. Very nice proclamation. Now I will read the proclamation from the City of Truth or Consequences. Whereas the health and safety of all of our residents is crucial to the happiness, prosperity, and well-being of our communities, families, and whereas is proud of our dedicated police officers who put their lives at risk every day in order to keep our communities safe. And whereas these officers stand as leaders and teachers, educating the community about the importance of public safety. And whereas we appreciate the extraordinary efforts and sacrifices made by officers and their family members on a daily basis in order to protect our schools, workplaces, roads, and homes. And whereas Law Enforcement Appreciation Day is an opportunity to show our support for all law enforcement and honor their immense efforts. Now, therefore, I, Stephen Green, Mayor, on behalf of the City Commission of the City of Truth or Consequences, Sierra County, New Mexico, do hereby proclaim the week of May 22nd through 26, 2017 as Law Enforcement Appreciation Week in Truth or Consequences, and further extend appreciation to our Truth or Consequences Police Department, along with the Sierra County Sheriff's Department and the New Mexico State Police for the vital services they perform on their exemplary dedication to the communities they protect. Signed, Stephen Green, Mayor. I'd like to present this to the officers. Would you all please join me to the front, as well as my fellow commissioners. Here's the proclamation from the city of Truth and Consequences on behalf of Mayor Green and my fellow commissioners. And you'll give these to them.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, if I may, I think it's important to know that today is Ted Ontivero's birthday. Is that correct, sir? Thank you. Happy birthday. You still look 21 like always, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. The next item is a presentation of a certified municipal clerk designation. We're going to wait till our guardians of our property and lives and our children and our dogs and everything else go back to business. They're going to protect and serve.
Hopefully not a lot of business.
Yes, good point. Okay. I've got two things to read and then the presentation, so it's in context and you'll understand the value of what this achievement means. Presentation of Certified Municipal Clerk Designation for Angela Torres, Deputy Clerk. Background. The Certified Municipal Clerk Program is designed to enhance the job performance of the clerk in small and large municipalities. To earn the CMC designation, a municipal clerk must attend extensive education programs. The CMC designation also requires pertinent experience in a municipality. The CMC program prepares the applicants to meet the challenges of the complex role of the municipal clerk by providing them with quality education in partnership with institutions of higher learning, as well as state, provincial, and national associations. The CMC program has been assisting clerks to excel since 1970. The process takes at least 3 years of attending an International Institute of Municipal Clerks, otherwise known as the IIMC, approved institute, which we hold annually in the state of New Mexico in October. Some of the requirements include affirming and practicing the IIMC Code of Ethics, must be an active member of IIMC for more than 2 years, must perform the core duties of a municipal clerk, 60 points in education and 50 points in experience. As of May 1, 2017, there are a total of 4,667 CMCs in the world, 4,518 in the United States, and 58, now 59, in the state of New Mexico. We are very proud to present this recognition to Angela Torres, Deputy Clerk, who received her CMC designation through her hard work and dedication to the clerk's office and our community. And we also have a letter from the president of the IIMC, Vincent Budagliari, Did I do that right? Clerk, thank you. Dear Angela Torres, and now with the initial CMC after your name. On behalf of the Board of Directors, it is my pleasure to inform you that you have been awarded the International Institute of Municipal Clerks designation of Certified Municipal Clerk. Included in this package is your hard-earned certificate, as well as your label pin. We hope you wear it proudly. IIMC grants the CMC designation only to those municipal clerks who complete demanding education requirements and who have a record of significant contributions to their local government, their community, and state. In light of the speed and dramatic nature of changes these days, lifelong learning is not only desirable, it is necessary for all in local government to keep pace with growing demands and changing needs of the citizens we serve. We applaud your educational accomplishments and achievement of this milestone and congratulate you on your personal pursuit of professional excellence. I would like to ask, I believe, your husband, your daughter Janelle, and I think that gentleman might be your dad, to please come down, and I'd like my fellow commissioners and Manager Fuentes and the light at the end of the tunnel, our clerk of the year, Renee Canton, to join us as well. Priscilla, something to shoot for. I expect it would be me or any of the other commissioners are going to have the honor of doing this for you and your family. In case you recognize Janelle, she was the young lady that joined me on the recycling trailer and was in the newspaper. And actually, the Herald gave us a blow-up of that picture, and we had it framed, and I don't know where it is, but hopefully it's not in the garbage. So, she was an absolute joy to be with for those 2 hours, absolute joy. She was very quiet for the first 10 minutes. For the next hour and a half, we shut up. I know him. Oh, Harry, look at him. What is Janelle? So I want her to do it every year with us. International Institute of Municipal Clerks hereby confers the title of Certified Municipal Clerk upon Angela Torres, CMC, who has completed the requirements prescribed by the International Institute of Municipal Clerks for certification. Certified this 9th day of May, AD 2017, signed by the President and also the Director of Education, Jane Wong. So, would you like to present that to your mom? This is a sorority party, something like that. Angela's going to get pinned. That's it. Yeah, I'm glad you joined us. Where did you come from? Joe, you look like you see, oh, excellent. So you have no problem finding parking, the traffic was not bad or anything like that. I think I can maybe speak for the commission on this one. We all work with City Hall. We all see staff at City Hall. They like to see me a couple times a day, but the graciousness, the professionalism, and the dedication to the job, I believe, is absolutely evident, and it is the trickle down to it. So, congratulations, and as I say, Priscilla, you're next. Let's have a nice round of applause. Okay, moving on. Always the fun part of the agenda for me, anyway. Consent calendar, looking for a motion for approval of the Public Utility Advisory Board minutes of April 17, 2017, Public Arts Advisory Board minutes for April 17, 2017, and the one-year lease renewal for Geronimo Trail Scenic Byway, Inc. for 301 Foch.
Motion as presented.
I have a motion as presented by Commissioner Frankel. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. City Commission regular minutes of April 25th, 2017. I'm looking for approval of that document.
Motion to approve the minutes of April 25th, City Commission regular minutes.
I have a motion by Commissioner Frankel. I need a second.
Second.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem White. Is there any further discussion on that particular item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Mayor, be it known that I abstained.
Thank you. So noted. Carries unanimously. Next item is public hearings. Let's see if we have anyone who signed up. Just let me have that one. Okay, so we have no one who has signed up as an opponent or proponent, but I will give you one last chance. I'll call them off one at a time. So anyone who wanted to speak on public hearing, final adoption of ordinance 680-16/17, amending Chapter 2, Article 4, Division 6 related to boards, commissions, and committees.
And what it says, is for the record, is that we're repealing Division 6, which is the Industrial and Economic Development Advisory Board.
Right, I mentioned that actually before, but thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification on that. Seeing none, I will close that portion of the public hearing. Moving on to G2, which is the public hearing and final adoption of ordinance number 681, amending section 2/22 of the Code of Ordinance relating to commission meetings. Anyone like to speak for or against? Seeing none, I will close that portion of the public hearing. The last item is public hearing application with the USDA Rural Development for financial assistance for water system improvements, Phase 1, Cook Street Treatment Facility. And we did have one person, Beatrice.
No, that was a mistake. Sorry.
Okay, we allow mistakes to happen all the time, no problem at all. So, seeing, are there anyone who would like to, in the audience, who would like to speak for or against that? Seeing none, I will close that portion of the public hearing and we will move on. Thank you very much. The next item is H1, and that is final adoption of ordinance number 680, 16/17, amending Chapter 2, Article 4, Division 6 related to boards, commissions, and committees. Manager Fuentes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. The proposed ordinance will delete the Industrial Economic Development Advisory Board. The city, through other means, promotes economic development, whether it's in-house, their participation with the other local entities, organizations such as the New Mexico Economic Development Department, Rural Council, New Mexico Partnership, Main Street, and other collaborative organizations like the Middle Rio Grande Economic Development Association that is just forming. So with that, we've held a publication, and at this time, staff is recommending approval of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, concerns about this? Seeing none, I will stand for a motion, please.
Mayor, I'd like to move for final adoption of ordinance number 680, 16-7/17, which amends Chapter 2, Article 4, Division 6, related to boards, commissions, and committees by repealing Division 6, Industrial and Economic Development Board in its entirety.
Thank you. I have a motion by Commissioner Heschler. I need a second. I will second that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. I beg your pardon, I need a roll call.
Honorable
Madam
Steve
Clerk?
Green?
Yes.
Honorable Sandra Whitehead?
Yes.
Honorable Ralph Heschler?
Yes.
Honorable Kathy Clark?
Yes.
Honorable Joshua Franco?
Yes.
Thank you. Carries unanimously. The next item is H2, discussion action, final adoption of ordinance number 681, amending section 2/22 of the Code of Ordinances related to commission meetings. City Clerk Treasurer Renee Campton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. This ordinance is for final adoption, and the only change to it is removing the actual days and times of the regular meetings and adding pursuant to the Open Meetings Act resolution adopted annually. So in the case that commissioners want to change the meeting day, the resolution is the only thing we have to change.
Thank you. Any questions, concerns, comments? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to move that we amend Chapter 2, Article 2, Commission, Section 2-22 of the City Code of the City of Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, so that Section 2-22, Paragraph 1 reads as follows. The Commission will hold regular meetings pursuant to the Open Meetings Act resolution adopted annually.
Thank you, sir. Could I ask you to amend that motion by including ordinance number 681 in the statement?
And please include ordinance number 681 in the statement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
I have a motion by Commissioner Heschler. I need a second.
Second that motion.
I have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Honorable Steve Green?
Yes.
Honorable Sandra Whitehead?
Yes.
Honorable Ralph Heschler?
Yes.
Honorable Joshua Franco?
Yes.
Honorable Kathy Clark?
Yes.
Carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item is resolution number 3516/17, Juvenile Adjudication Fund, otherwise known as the JAF grant for teen court, and we have Municipal Judge Sanders here to do the presentation.
Honorable Mayor Green, Commission, this is an application that I apply for every year. It is to continue to work with the juvenile offenders in our community. It is a program that works with juveniles to deter them from going any further into the judicial system, if at all possible. Therefore, it is now considered primarily a juvenile diversion program. This program has been in the municipal court and in the city since 1991. The JAF completely reimburses the city for expenses that I make under the guidelines of this grant. So for the past, since 2007, we've had no problems with this grant, and I believe we have not had any problems with reimbursements to the city for expenses under this grant. It is an important program in our community. It is supplemented by Juvenile Justice Adjudication Grant. Both of them seek the same purpose, is to try to divert juveniles from the judicial system. They are not adjudicated juveniles, but they're juveniles that are sent to me by the schools, for truancy primarily, for campus violation of campus policies. They are sent to me for from JPPO, Juvenile Probation and Parole, for violations that the respondents are charged with, and sometimes the courts for traffic. So we work with these juveniles and try to educate, intervene, educate, and prevent them from going any further into the justice system, juvenile justice system. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you. Are there any questions of Judge Sanders? I just have one, Judge. So
Yes.
this money that would be available, the state can't cut this money in relationship to the state's fiscal budget crisis. This is not that type of funding.
Actually, if you'd asked me that about 3 years ago, I would have said, yes, they can. We had acquired an legal representation that prevents that from happening now because of a simple matter of the wording. When we started out with Judicial Adjudication Fund, we weren't very good with the wording, and so the governor at that time did a grant sweep, and a great percentage of our grant funds were gone. So after that, we got legal representation to put it in wording to where this money is already earmarked for the purpose and for the counties. And so my understanding is that we're good.
Good. Thank you for the explanation. I appreciate it. It's on everyone's mind right now, especially with this special session, that's for sure. All right.
It's not a lot of money, Mayor Green. I don't think that they would pause. Look, it's not a whole lot of money. I believe this year is something like $154,000 that they distribute or award statewide. So it's not a big deal of money.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any further questions?
Anything else?
Observations? Seeing none, I will stand for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of resolution number 351617, Juvenile Adjudication Fund, JAF, grant for teen court as presented by Municipal Judge, Beatrice Sanders.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second.
Second?
Second by Commissioner Frankel. Excuse me. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mayor.
Commissioner
Judge,
Clark.
I would like to thank you for the many years that you have continued to fight for these young people in our community, and you don't stop. That's it, Mayor.
Short, to the point, and right on target. Thank you. Seeing no other comments, I will ask for a roll call. Madam Clerk, please.
Honorable Steve Green?
Yes?
Honorable Sandra Whitehead?
Yes.
Honorable Ralph Eschler?
Yes.
Honorable Kathy Clark?
Yes.
Honorable Joshua Frankel?
Yes.
Thank you. Carries unanimously. The next item is number 4, discussion action, resolution number 3616/17, budget adjustment resolutions, Director of Finance, Melissa Thomas.
Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, City Manager Fuentes. We are respectfully requesting the following budget adjustments to help us make the adjustments for the end of the fiscal year. General Fund Gross Receipts Hospital, $55,000 increase of the revenue. General Fund Gross Receipts Infrastructure 1/8, $10,000 increase because of revenue line is up. General Fund Receipts Municipal, $50,000 due to revenue line up. General Fund Gross Receipts Municipal District, $70,000 because the revenue accounting line is up. General Fund New Mexico Beautification Grant, $7,700 because of an additional grant. General Fund OBS DWI, $6,625 to add a budget to that. General Fund Surplus Auction Proceeds, $4,500 due to additional auctions that we're attending, accounting line up. General Fund Accounting Fees Expense, $20,000 attorney expense fees. General Fund Contractual Services Expense, $6,500 for Systems MD IT. General Fund Contractual Services, $55,000 expense for the hospital GRT. General Fund Utilities expense, $5,000. Transfer out, $108,000 for the PDGRT and airport. Corrections, local correction fee, $1,500. Revenue, collecting more court revenue. Municipal street, GRT, 20% street fund. Revenue, $40,000. Revenue fund is up. Municipal street, state, LGRF, accounting revenue line up, $12,531. PDGRT, USDA grants, revenue, $72,000, out of budget. PDGRT, miscellaneous, revenue, $10,500, out of budget. These are for the body cameras. PDGRT, other capital purchases, expense, $60,000. Increased PDGRT accounting line expense due to the PD vehicles and lights and equipments. Transfer in, $93,000 for the PDGRT. Impact fees, water impact fee, revenue, $105,000. Impact fee, revenue, $105,000 to add to a budget on both ends. Increase, transfer in, $28,418. This is to pay a USDA loan for phase 1. Debt service principal, expense, $14,000. Debt service interest, expense, $14,418. R&R airport, airport fuel farm, add a budget, $190,000. R&R, airport taxiway pavement, $5,400. Expense, R&R airport fuel farm, expense line, add a budget, $100,000. R&R water, interest income, $2 to add a budget. Pledge state, dedicate gross receipts, revenue, $50,000. Utility office sales, add a budget, $9,000 on the revenue. Utility office, return checks, increase revenue, $1,000. Electric, utility service fund, revenue, $400,000. Water, utilities, revenue, $60,000. Solid waste utility services, revenue, $100,000. Wastewater utility service, revenue increase, $80,000. Transfer out, $28,418. Again, for the debt for the wastewater phase 1 loan. Transfer station, revenue up, $120,000. Internal services, revenue up, $6,000. And that concludes our adjustments for this commission. I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission? Seeing none, I will. I'm sorry, no, I just said it makes sense to me. Oh, sorry. No, that's all right. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, just real quick, and I think one of the things that's important to note is that the state is making a lot of changes in the way municipalities are being asked to report to the state. What they do is they take, whether it's the final budget, the numbers that are submitted to them, and they'll put them on a spreadsheet. And anytime there's an adjustment done, if expenses are increased, they want to see where it's offset by a revenue side. So in the past, but I mean, they're tracking that on the numbers, so that they don't necessarily deal with what's actually in the cash. So while the municipality might have the funds necessary on paper, we have to be adjusting all the time. So you will start seeing more and more of these adjustments on both sides. And in the past, they were mainly focused on the expense side.
Okay, I just have one comment, Ms. Torres. I would just like, after we get finished with budgets and everything else and start moving into the new year, to start to track our expenses for the contract for the IT. Because I understand they're up in Albuquerque, sometimes it's not an immediate response, and I'm just wondering, at the end of the year, are we better served by contracting that service out rather than having someone in-house? But I think we need a year's worth of history to probably make that determination. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Seeing there are no other questions or comments? Okay. So I will need a resolution for approval of the budget adjustments as presented.
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of resolution number 361617, budget adjustment resolution as presented by Melissa Torres, our finance director.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second.
Second, Mayor.
I have a second by Commissioner Heschler. Are there any further questions, concerns? Seeing none, I will ask for a roll call. Madam Clerk, please.
Honorable Steve Green?
Yes.
Honorable Sandra Whitehead?
Yes.
Honorable Ralph Eschler?
Yes.
Honorable Kathy Clark?
Yes.
Honorable Joshua Franco?
Yes.
Carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item is under H5, discussion action resolution number 3716/17, approving the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2017/2018. Once again, Melissa Torres, our Director of Finance.
Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, City Manager Fuentes, City Clerk Renee. Mr. Fuentes and I will also be partnering up in regards to this presentation. But before I start, one of the things that I definitely wanted to do was, I know Commissioner Clark had concern about our benefits, and so we just wanted to give you guys an outline in regards to the benefits that an employee pays and the city pays. So if you don't mind, if I could pass that out. So this kind of gives you just a breakdown of what an employee pays, what their contributions are versus the city's contributions, and then the over impact of what we pay as a city as a whole. So, of course, you know, you guys are very welcome to come by if you guys need more information or need us to outline it a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the presentation in regards to the prelim budget. As the first slide, we've gone over from the previous workshop about the budget and the budget process. We're going to go ahead and jump into the 2017-18 general fund budget. And one of the things that we want to highlight to you is our estimated revenues is at $3.7 million. Our prelim expenses are at $5.4 million. And as you can see, our expenses are a little bit higher than definitely higher than our revenue, which then gives us a shortfall of $1.6 million. And then that's where the transfers in come in to subsidize it. So you take your revenue plus your transfers in, and it gives us a general balance of $2,020 of the prelim budget.
Excuse me, Ms. Torres, would you possibly have another copy of this? Commissioner Heschler does not have one. This is 2016, 2017. Oh, you got it. Oh, okay. Beg your pardon, I misread the year. Sorry.
So that gives you the overview in the outline of our revenue and our expenses for the general fund. And that is the message you will hear throughout this presentation in regards to our revenue and our expenses. Yes, our revenue is going up, as you can see, and that's a great thing. But again, it's not, it's a cycle. It's not something that has been declared, meaning we have an increase of taxes or increase of a regular surplus that's coming in. With this next graph, it gives you an outline since the fiscal of 2009 till present to our prelim budget. And as you can see, with our expenses in the red and our revenue in the blue and our differences, our trend is going in a good direction in the years of 13 and 14. However, we're starting to separate in the years 15, 16, and 17, and that is the overview again because our revenue is up. However, it's still short in regards to the expenses we are expending out as a whole.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I'd like to kind of add some additional comments to this chart. And I think as one of the things to take from this, and it's important to note, is since the difference between fiscal year '09, both on the revenue side and expenditure side, the net right now, based on that, is $34,000 that has grown as far as expenses exceeding the revenue. I think, in a prior meeting, when we were talking about allocations and expenses, I know one of the questions that was asked, do we have resources available? Well, we may have resources at that point in time, or we can always use ending cash balances, we can always transfer more money, but I think we definitely have work to do in regards to promoting economic development, promoting GRT. That's why it's so critical, initiatives like the Visitor Center and other, trying to get recruiting businesses in town is so critical because we want to see the revenue line go up. If we start seeing the expenditure side go up, then that means that eventually we're going to have to start transferring more money in. And that's just food for thought and just something just to be keeping back of your mind.
Yes, and just to add to Mr. Fuentes in regards to that, we need to look at other sources that will sustain us in a longevity time. Thinking outside the box is something we're going to have to really do. It's wonderful that we have these new updates like the Veterans Center, but it's not a longevity of our revenue, and so that's what we're shooting for these coming years. 5-year strategic plan is like, what are we going to do to sustain us and continue to sustain us in that direction? And so that's basically where Mr. Fuentes and I are going with that. The next the next slide is in regards to the 18 prelim recap, and this gives you the overview of all the special revenues, the enterprises fund, and the general enterprise. As you can see, again, just to echo what Mr. Fuentes says, is that, DFA is getting a lot stricter with municipalities and guidelines. And so one of the requirements that DFA has for us, as you guys know, is our reserve, which is the $450,000. Once we pay out all of our expenses and take in all our revenue, that gives us an ending cash balance of $2,020. Again, with this graph, this pie graph gives you a demonstration of our municipal taxes taking a 46% of our revenue coming in and our shared state taxes. So those are very important, and as you can see, those are areas where we're wanting to break the pie into increasing different areas that are longevity so we can have other means of revenue coming in for the city. The general fund tax detail just lays out the taxes, the gross receipts that we are collecting as an overall. And for the prelim of 2017-18, that gives us $1.7 million, a total of 1.5.
Melissa, let me add a comment on this chart. In regards to some of the estimates that Melissa and I worked on for the GRT, we did see an increase because of the Veterans Home project. However, we had to take that into account that when we were estimating these figures, the growth was way higher than what is in here. So we couldn't estimate that much growth because we don't know when the next project is going to get started. So we had to be a little bit more conservative. We understand that the hospital will be constructing their facility, and it's a $30 million facility, but until that happens, we couldn't overestimate. So we were trying to be conservative keeping in mind that that was a one-time project that gave us a good boost to our GRT and revenue.
What about the school project?
Any activity that happened during that fiscal year? Exactly. That's why we were considering those things. And those are projects that we, as we develop the budget, we ask staff or we, with Robbie, what's currently under construction that will give us that boost. But once those projects are completed, we do anticipate having a decrease in GRT.
Yeah, and just to add to Mr. Fuentes in regards to that, what it was, the numbers that we were looking for as an increase of our revenue was at 23%. 23% is tremendous when you're preparing a budget. And so we definitely had to take those factors in, the Veteran Center, the school. And so to be fiscally responsible, usually your margin is between 10% and 15%. And that's what we did. We did about 11.5%, threw it in the middle of when we did our projections of the numbers of the revenue.
Could I ask you a question on the property tax? You have current, and it looks like projected around 150, same as last year, 151,000. Property tax prior, could you explain what that means?
Yes, sir. What it is people that fail to pay their taxes in a timely manner. So that is what it is for that revenue.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Going into our next slide, transfers in. Again, as you can see, our revenues for the general fund is 32% of our revenue is still transfers in that's coming in to support the general fund. You know, and again, you know, this is something that is constantly in our mind. When we meet for budget meetings, I don't think there's a time that we don't discuss this when we're making decisions about the transfers in, because we're thinking about how are we going to wean ourselves from this, and where we can start looking into subsidizing those areas. And the other major factors of our revenue is our municipal taxes at 31%, and then our shared state taxes at 29%. The next slide represents the revenues transferred in. And again, it just kind of gives you the overview of what the pie was just showing you previously as a whole, as a numbers. And again, as you can see, you know, the general fund is being subsidized at $1.7 million in the general fund, and that's what it was this fiscal year too. So that just shows us areas we need to work on and improve. This pie represents the general fund and expenditures, and as you can see, the majority of our expenses is at salaries and benefits at 59%. And I know Commissioner Clark had some concerns, and they were very valid concerns, and thank you for voicing that. And we definitely looked at it as a whole. But, you know, one good thing is as a municipality and a government entity, we are recognized as a whole body in the state of New Mexico, and that's the kind of premiums we're paying. So if we're looking at going somewhere else, then we would look at something like standing alone. But again, this will definitely be part of our radar of when we are doing our budgets. This next slide is our expenditure detail, and it just gives you an overview in more detail again in regards to the numbers of what the previous pie is representing. The next slide is the general fund, and it gives you that summary of the final budget. So for this fiscal year, salaries made up $3.2 million. At today, for this new prelim budget, we're proposing a $3.5 million. Operating for this fiscal year was 1.6, and the operating for what we're proposing for the prelim is 1.8. Capital outlay is $33,000 this fiscal year. Capital outlay for our new fiscal year is $21,000. Transfers out for this fiscal year was $485,000. Transfers out for the proposed new fiscal year is $636,000, which gives us the bottom line of both transfers in from this fiscal year and transfers in for the following upcoming fiscal year will be at $1.7 million.
And before you go on to the next slide, Melissa, Mayor Commissioner, I just wanted to kind of highlight some of the changes that happened in the salaries because you see the big jump from fiscal year 17 to 18. One of the reasons why is because we did budget for the animal shelter. We do have additional, we have moved part-time positions that were in the parks to full-time because of the need. We've also added a modest salary adjustment for all of the departments in the general fund. And again, it was almost about, not a huge amount, but it was across the board that is included in the preliminary, and with the exception of department heads in my position. Those will have to be addressed in the final budget. So all other employees, we included a proposed salary adjustment. Operating expenses, again, is just as noted due to the prior year activities. So the majority of the increase was on both on the salaries and, as you can see, on the transfer out because of some of the grants and projects that we have going on. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Mayor Fuentes, how was the salary increases, how was that given out, and how was each department, who received what, and how was it received?
Well, what's proposed in the preliminary budget is a $1,000 across the board for all positions, with the exception of some. For example, and in addition with that, let me first start with that. $1,000, 25% of that, I have asked the department heads to have a little bit of authority and flexibility, depending on the employee's evaluation, depending on whether they made their training hours, and also depending on whether they're doing obviously a good job. They have that flexibility whether to give that additional 25%, which means the total 1,000. The 1,000 cannot be, it's only for each, again, for the majority of those in the general fund. In some positions in the general fund, there's an additional increase because some have taken additional duties. Some have received some certifications, and some have been promoted or promoted in responsibility and position. In the utility side, what's in the preliminary is an across the board, with the exception of clerical, they fall within the 1,000, across the board $2,000. Again, and with the same 25% authority to the department head, whether depending on their evaluation, the performance, and training hours. Again, and there are some positions in the utilities that, again, depending on whether they receive certifications, the majority of them is either $2,000 or $1,000. And again, those salary adjustments exclude my position and the department heads, and those will be addressed in the final.
Manager, it's been how many years since they've received a raise in those positions?
Which positions?
The ones that you're talking about, not the department head, not yourself.
Every year, I believe we made some adjustments. I think last year we made some small adjustments, and I believe that prior to that, I'll have to look. There was probably about only 1 year that were postponed, but almost every year there is some adjustments that are budgeted in the final.
Just one more comment, and first of all, it's great that we're able to give our employees an increase. I think it's well deserved. I know they work hard. Why? I noticed you said that the clerical positions received 1,000, where other positions received 2. What's the difference?
In the enterprise side, again, on the enterprise side, those are the clerical positions that I'm referring to there. Again, versus some of the folks who are out on the field. For example, you have wastewater, you have street, you have wastewater, solid waste who are out on the field. In my opinion, they're more comparable to what we have on the general fund side with the clerical staff that we have. That's why I proposed that in the preliminary.
Okay. Yeah, from my viewpoint, I think your clerical staff are just as important as your field staff. I think they're just as deserving. They're the ones that supply the tools and things that your field staff need. And I would just like to see that if we're going to do something like this across the board, this is just my opinion, or that we do something, I guess we do it across the board, and we value all positions the same, as much as we can. Giving that increase, placing that increase in the middle, where, remember when I said 2% for those above a certain salary and 3% below. I know we can't do that exactly, but I would like to see clerical staff receive, maybe the same breaks as the people in the field.
And again, Mr. Mayor, and I'm not sure if you're referring just to the clerical staff in the enterprise funds or all clerical staff, including those in the general fund.
Well, if they're differentiated from city employees in the field, I don't think they should be.
Well, and again, I go back, and the reason, because if, in this chart here, in the general fund, as you can see, all we have to allocate in the preliminary is only $2,000. So, I was trying to be as fair as I could with all employees in certain categories. For example, for the utilities, in my opinion, okay, it is, those are positions that we're always struggling to fill, especially those positions that are dealing with water, wastewater, solid waste, and the electric. So we're trying to make those positions more competitive and start increasing those salaries so that we can retain good employees in those positions. I'm not to say that clerical is not critical in those positions, in those departments, but in my opinion, those positions are similar to what we have in the general fund, in the clerk's office, in the finance department, and some of the other offices. So in an effort to trying to be fair with all of the people who may see themselves in that same category as clerical, that's why I propose for those positions to have the same salary adjustments as those others in the general fund. No one proposal is perfect. There's always going to be somebody that's going to be unhappy, because even these across the board adjustments, percentage-wise, some are going to earn 2%, some will earn 8%. But again, the goal, part of the goal is to bring some of the lower end paid employees, bringing them up higher on their wages, because some of them are making, sometimes they're not even making living wage. So that's ultimately the goal, is bringing, and some of those positions are actually field positions that are in the water, wastewater, and solid waste. So again, that is the preliminary proposal, but the commission ultimately has the authority to make any additional allocations as it is within their authority as the finance board.
I have a question to add to that. So my understanding, what you're saying is that some of these field positions may be paying far less per hour than the clerical, and that's why you're trying to get that up. So when we're looking at, a $10 an hour, or $12 an hour standard of living for our community, or whatever we want to put it at, if somebody's making 7, you're trying to bump them up to closer to 9, where a clerical would be going from 10, 11 to maybe 12. Is that the kind of logic?
Yes. And that is correct. We do have some positions. For example, I think we're advertising a meter reader. What's the hourly rate on that?
It's $10 an hour.
$10 an hour. And so we're trying to increase those kind of positions where you have people who are having to walk the city every month multiple times and deal through certain elements. And I understand it's a hard to place a value between. I get that. It's clerical. All positions are. We try to find the best balanced solution. But we do have certain positions that are way below $10 that we need to start bringing up to make them competitive, because we still have continuing turnover. And in my opinion, if we make those positions more valuable, I can assure you, the water, wastewater, solid waste, and electric will be able to retain those employees longer than what we have.
Thank you, because I did agree with Commissioner Heschler that, it's kind of how do you come up with 1,000 here and 2,000 there, but what your explanation is to try to boost those really poor paying positions up so that their catching makes a little bit more sense to me.
Do you take into account professional development with positions if they've received certain certifications that they would garner a greater increase?
If the funding is available, Mayor, Commissioners, we do not normally allocate an amount there for professional development, again, because the resources are not there. In some positions, for example, if an employee applies for a position that calls for a certain level of certification, and they meet those certifications, then they don't get an increase. But if they want to take additional training that's not within their job description, I mean, we give them that opportunity, but that does not mean that they get additional compensation, primarily because it's not in our budget. And we don't have a program for that allocates. Now, if there is some that in this preliminary budget that have reached some level of certification recognition, we will put it in there, but we do not have a program that will have additional increases for every time there's a certification received.
Didn't we give increases to people, for instance, if they're CDL qualified to teach, that they've gotten increases?
We have given, in the past, we have given, it was a practice that if an employee took on additional responsibilities, that they were compensated for those additional responsibilities.
Did those employees then receive the additional certification they needed to?
No, not for just receiving a certification, it was for additional responsibilities.
Okay.
And in prior years, some department heads would obviously plead their case for an employee who received a particular certification, whether it was in recycling or composting or things like that. But for the most part, adjustments were for employees who took on additional responsibility. As an example, Bo, as our director, and I believe Benny, they both are CDL trainers.
Right.
And that's outside of their scope of their job description. And Bo has been doing that for many, many years, even prior to me being manager. He was assigned as a CDL trainer, and he was given additional compensation for those duties.
But doesn't that position also, isn't there a certification process for that position, and shouldn't they be certified if they're going to get compensated for it?
I don't know if they were certified back when they were compensated for that, or if they had the level of training, because they've been doing it for a number of years, giving training employees to getting their CDLs.
All right, thank you.
And if I may just add in regards to that, in the past, I don't think comparables were looked at. And now we are looking at comparables. So what is a comparable? It's basically identifying the job and its classification. So with the city, what we have is called GS positions. And with the GS position, it identifies the job description and the value of that job. What we're doing in human resources now is when we have a new employee come in, that we are looking at the comparables as a whole. We're not looking at comparables for just that department. We're looking at the comparables as a citywide, and that's how it should be done. So then you're as a city in the salaries that the threshold is rising as a whole line going up together. However, that wasn't done in the past, so we do have a bottom line right now that we have to pick up. And I think that that's where Mr. Fuentes is going in regards to, we need to do that as a whole, is to get those bottom lines from the bottom and start lifting that up. And that's by giving those certain positions that are down on that threshold a little bit more as a whole, to start getting up to the rest of the line that we are drawing up.
Any further questions? I'd like to make a comment. I thought that was a great dialogue between the commission manager and Melissa. And I hear where you're coming from, Commissioner Heschler. And I so appreciate Commissioner Clark, because you asked the one question that kind of opened up the box and everyone could understand it. So thank you for putting that in. I will say that as a commissioner working with, as part of the team, when Manager Fuentes was then Director of Finance in your position, for the last as many years as he's been here, I have heard a constant drone of, we got to take care of staff. I got to find money for staff. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys hearing the concerns of the commission, that we wanted to raise the bar. We wanted to make these positions valuable so that you're going to perform at a level of expectation that we feel is reasonable, because if you lose that position, you're not going to be able to duplicate it in the city anywhere else. So we wanted to, and I know that dollars are tight and there's no perfect world, but at least you're starting, and I just personally want to thank both of you for that. So, microphone is yours, ma'am.
Going back to the slide, the prelim recap, it just gives you the overview of enterprise funds, the cemetery, the utility office, the electric division, the water division, the solid waste division, the wastewater division, landfill, golf course, and municipal airport. As you guys noticed in regards to our budget adjustments that we had just previously, a lot of our revenue was going up. Again, that has the attest of our billing cycle being sent out regularly and coming in on a regular basis. I would predict that this fiscal year will be a good fiscal year to give us a parallel line to do a comparison for the next fiscal year. And this slide just represents, again, the overview of the prelim budget for us as a city of Tier C. The next slide gives us our projects and equipments that we have completed. And I know Mr. Fuentes will jump in regards to that. Start with the Healing Water Plaza. We have completed that.
And if I may, Melissa, kind of go over these some lines real quick. I know Tracy's in the audience in case if there's any questions. And I think some of these projects we already covered during the workshop. But just for the benefit of the public and the paper who weren't at the workshop, these are some of the projects and equipment that were completed during this fiscal year that ends in June 30th. We're looking at the Healing Waters Plaza, wastewater treatment plant phase 1, fuel farm phase 1, landfill closure, water system PER-AMP, the electric system PER-AMP, USDA vehicles and equipment for the police vehicles in the front end loader. We've completed the Rotary Arena improvements. Hopefully that's just one of many phases to come. Fire Department Administrative Office, Airport Maintenance Building that has been vacated and staff is starting to move into the new building. The first ever LEADA project for the city, the TRC Brewery, was completed, and I believe the funds have been received.
Yes,
and
sir.
the TRC Brewery is already requesting reimbursement, so.
The reimbursement has been, been received already.
Excellent, thank you. So that's moving quite well. The phase 4 of the polycar transition, and Andy and his staff did an excellent job transitioning the city in all polycars. The FEMA floodplain update, that is under review by FEMA. Again, the local government road front project, the city hall roof, and we've had some rains and it's not leaking, correct, Melissa?
Correct.
So, good.
And we thank you for that.
The Luis Amijo Park scoreboards, the Luis Amijo Little League field, airport runway, taxiway improvements, recycling ground equipment. I believe that was Skidster, or is that what it was? Forklift. It was a forklift. The electric department storage building hopefully will be done by June 30th. And so these are some of the projects that we have for fiscal year in 2018. We have the Sims Road Rehab project. And again, keep in mind that these are all projects that for the most part are in the budget. And again, trying to stretch the resources that we have between staff and operating expenses and capital outlay and projects for the community. We have the Sims Road Rehab Phase 1. We're going to have to split that project. I know the commissioners wanted to do it all in one shot, but due to available resources, we can only do it in phases. So we thought of Sims being the first phase. The animal shelter, the law enforcement complex, that will be forthcoming to the commission for consideration. The architects are working on that. Wastewater treatment plant Phase 2A has started, but we have come across a delay that I think, where staff is working through. CDBG sewer rehab project, the fuel farm Phase 2, USDA water system Phase 1 application. Tracy's working on that with Melissa and Sandra from USDA. Fuel farm Phase 3, electric system NMFA application, and hopefully a Rotary Arena Phase 2 improvements. I know there's some additional improvements we'd like to do out there. The water electric meter AMI, that will be forthcoming soon. The soccer field, ball field improvements. I've heard good comments about so far how things are looking out, but they do want to see more improvements out there. Turtleback Mountain landfill, that is the golf course landfill that we have out there. SGOA appropriations, local government road front projects, the Broadway sidewalk project that will be completed by September. So Veterans Wall, we're still on hold on that by the state. And then we have some electric capacitor upgrades, electric testing and maintenance, electric battery and enclosure, IT police department upgrades, I believe that's underway. The IT municipal court upgrades, we're working on those. And we're also looking at IC citywide improvements, citywide IT. New school road radar, hopefully that will be completed the first quarter of the new fiscal year. Tracy's working on USDA equipment applications. And this is a project that I think has a lot of potential and that I spoke to Commissioner Frankel about, and that's the Foch Water Harvesting Project. It is in there, but I believe that a formal presentation will be forthcoming, I believe, at the next meeting? Correct. So some of the projects and equipment that is still to be determined that we're working on is, we're looking at still on the Elephant View Lake minimum pool, the swimming pool resurfacing, that's still, I know it's a concern to some of the community, and that's still out there, but we have no funding allocation. I know we talked about a senior recreation center building, the Enterprise Public Works building, McAdoo Road rehab, that's the other side of the road. And there's also been some requests for a potential bus route pilot project, especially with the businesses in the downtown, trying to capture those potential GRT from people going to the lake, but because of fear of getting pulled over, then obviously they're staying there. So if we can have a bus route system that can bring people to the downtown, to the businesses, definitely that will help increase our GRT. Administrative vehicles replacement, I know we have a couple of vehicles that we need to replace. And these are some of the items that are listed in the ICIP that, again, there's no funding source identified yet, but it is the construction and demolition landfill, storm drain improvements to the downtown, and some of that might be covered under the water harvesting presentation. Water well north, citywide broadband, again, in trying to promote, bringing in more business economic development. Definitely broadband is critical, and the regional detention center. So these are just some of the projects that we will be working on for the new fiscal year, and some that are, and I'm sure as the fiscal year goes, as we go into the new fiscal year, things will come across my desk, the commissioners, and that we'll be adding to the list. Thank you. And that is just the list of all the debt.
Yes.
And I think the last slide is just questions.
Yes, and we stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
I had a couple of observations I wanted to put in before we get to approval, if that's okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I noticed when the budget was presented to us a couple of weeks or so ago, in two of the departments I saw some discrepancies. One of them was in the fire presentation, and what was up on the board and what was in front of me was $70,000 difference. And I also noticed in wastewater, what was up on the board and what was in front of me was $35,000 off. And I neglected to make a comment about that at that particular time. And as far as I can remember, it was, the fire was $270 on one sheet of paper and $200 on the presentation. And in wastewater, it was the expense category that there was $35,000 difference. And so I'm wondering if off the top of your head you can tell me what I'm talking about. I wish I could pull it up, but I'm trying to find it, and it was, I believe it was, where I noticed it was in the solid waste division, when we're saying we're going to have like X amount of, money ahead at the end of the day. And now in solid waste, the preliminary is not showing that. So I don't know if you had noticed that, but that's just something that sticks out in my mind, that there were those two discrepancies in those two departments.
Yes, ma'am. And I can respond in regards to the wastewater discrepancy. I believe what it is we added on the expense side is the $28,418 debt that they will be paying on a yearly basis.
For wastewater?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
so,
for the USDA.
What wastewater presented to us And
That was
water
not
department?
included in that.
That was not?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
We failed to include that, and I apologize for that.
Okay, and the fire department?
Um,
It was a 270 and a 200, that I do remember.
I don't, you know, in the fire department,
And I-
it does change it because, what, Chief Tooley does is he will budget, he will give us his estimated revenues, and then he will budget all of the, he will budget, in the expenditure side, he will take whatever he thinks the ending cash balance is gonna be, plus his revenue, and he will budget all of it. So I know there's gonna be, he's probably gonna have some changes to that, depending on where he actually ends up in the beginning cash balance. You know, he was still kind of working with those numbers, but I can tell you that, you know, everything, normally the way it's budgeted, he wants to show it that he's spending all of it at the end of the fiscal year. So that's probably one of the reasons, if there was a 200 discrepancy, yes.
I guess my last question, Ms. Torres, and I don't mean to put you guys on the spot, but when a department head brings their budget into you, how frequently do you end up tweaking their budget by adding in other things that you know or removing things that you know? Is that common?
It is common, but what we do is we have budget meetings. And we try to have, we have this time 3 budget meetings in regards to that. What we do is we build from what they give us and present to us. Sometimes what happens is that the department head brings a proposed budget. What we do is we go in the conference room and present it on the big screen. And then sometimes we have to ask those questions because, of course, they have stars in their eyes of what they want to expend or, and not adjusting that revenue that needs to comparable to the expense of it. But when we make those changes, then we discuss that with the department head that we're making those changes and then submit that to them.
And let me add to some of the comments. And normally this is the standard practice, you know, every year is as with this year's finance department, you know, prepares the budget worksheet. And with the this year's budget, and it's presented to all, it's given to all the department heads. So with that budget worksheet, it includes the current staff and some of the current positions that are budgeted and operating expenses. So the first thing that finance looks at is at that level, for example, in the general fund, with our estimated revenues, where are we at? You know, so to take, for example, so if we can cover the personnel and expenses that we have this fiscal year, that's the #1 priority. And then after they come back, and then we look at the numbers, and they're overspending, we ask them, where do we find, we ask them to be part of the solution. Help us, where we're gonna get this revenue. So for example, in the wastewater, they requested capital outlay. But you also they have to consider not just capital outlay and personnel, operating expenses, they also have to consider the project that we have currently undergoing right now, any shortfalls in that project. So it's, as Melissa stated, it's, you know, a lot of times they come in with these great requests that exceed available resources. And that's when we kind of try to work with them to find a solution of how can we meet their needs, but at the same time within the available resources that they have. And that was so that we don't have a fund that just are depleting their reserves, where at the end of the day, they have no emergency funds or whatsoever. So I can tell you for the most part, this year's budget, I don't think anybody in the department heads were drastically cut from this year's budget. But I think where we did make some progress was on the utility side with, for example, the wastewater in particular, because that particular fund was always in the red in the past, and now they're starting to build some reserves, and now they're actually getting some equipment, but at the same time, we have a big project that they need money for, and that's one of the reasons why we're asking the Impact Fee Board to reimburse the water and wastewater, because they need that money, not just for equipment, but for the project that's out there.
Thank you, Ms. Torres.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other concerns?
Just like to make a suggestion. I think 19 completed projects by staff is a pretty awesome number. And I think it would be wonderful that we let the public and the citizens know how their dollars have been spent, I believe wisely and well. Maybe an article submitted to both newspapers, with all due respect to Chuck, you can't cover everything, and I think that would be important information to get out there, and we should probably make that an annual, let the citizens know what we've been doing for the last year, and they've been enjoying, hopefully. So, with that said, any further questions, last chance, last comments? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion for approval of the preliminary budget.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve resolution number 37-1617, approving the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2017-18 as presented by Melissa Torres, Finance Director, and Manager Fuentes.
We have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second. Second. We have a second by Commissioner Heschler. Is there any further comments, concerns, ideas? Last chance. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Honorable Steve Green?
Yes.
Honorable Sandra Whitehead?
Yes.
Honorable Ralph Eschler?
Yes.
Honorable Kathy Clark?
Yes.
Honorable Joshua Franco?
Yes.
Carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item under I is unfinished business, discussion action, lodger's tax allocations. Manager Fuentes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioners, this item was postponed from the last meeting. Before you, you had the, I believe, hopefully you have the applications that were submitted. And we have a total of $46,000 in the budget for allocation. And that was recommended by the Lodgers Tax Board. And at this time, it's at the Commissioner's discretion to endorse the recommendations or to make modifications and reallocate some of those funds.
Thank you. Concerns, ideas, thoughts? We've had 2 weeks to think about it. We've had a month to think about it.
Manager, excuse me, is that 46 just for the eligible, that doesn't include the co-op?
That's correct. That's just for the eligible.
Thank you.
Mayor, just a thought from my humble opinion is that, I'm probably not as well versed in lodger's tax as I should be, but it seems that we have a lodger's tax committee that did their due diligence and presented this information to the commission, that we should take their recommendation.
Okay.
Mayor, I have several questions.
Okay.
Chamber of Commerce has $16,000 written down. They were pretty precise in the amount of expenditures they were asking for, but $16,000 for the visitor's guide, and printing 30,000 copies for $16,000. What kind of detriment does that occur to our community by not having those amount of visitor's guides available for distribution? Friends of the Lake, I agree with. Geronimo Springs Museum, I see, and whether this has changed in the last month, but there's 8,200 out of the 10,000 that they were given last year that haven't been used as of the 24th of April, and I don't know why and what that's all about. Main Street had 9,000. I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption, which is not a good thing, but I know that there would be bills coming in from the Hot Springs Festival, and I would like to know what those are. I'm glad to see the twirlers trying to get into our program, because they do bring a lot of people in. I question Sierra County Arts Council. They used no monies last year. There was also a problem with them not having proper documentation, and they don't have proper documentation this time. And Veterans Memorial Park, they have $10,000 in expenses in our budget, and they have $4,000 perpetual care for the wall, and they don't have enough money in lodger's tax to even pay for one of the 2 billboards that they have up, and I think that they should at least have the billboard on the freeway paid for. Those are my comments.
Any other comments? I'm going to jump in. I agree with since I spend 2 days a week stocking up the Chamber's brochure, it obviously is helping the overall initiative, that is for sure. Friends of the Lake, I would like to go back to the, I know the Lodgers Tax Board recommended 1,000. I'd like to go back to 700. And where I'm going with this is the Veterans Memorial Park and Museum. And if you'll, my fellow commissioners will just give me one moment. Ron Pecoric from our Public Utility Advisory Board had spoken once during public comment, and Commissioner Frankel and I met with Ron. He is a rider, a Legion rider, and that has put us into internal affairs for the veterans in Washington, which has kicked us back to Albuquerque, which has put us up in Angel Fire. And I wish I could give you an answer today, but as of yesterday, we were talking with Ken Nadeau, who is president of the American Legion Riders for the state of New Mexico and all their chapters, and we're talking about producing an event coordinated around, and hopefully we will get it, the new memorial wall and the dedication of that, and have an event, a weekend event around that. If it's successful, we could bring in 400 people for a weekend. That's how many members are with all the chapters throughout the state. I know Ruidoso does 20,000 for a weekend. So I would like to put more money besides the billboards. And it's very, very confusing because it's city land, it's a city asset, and yet we seem to kind of like underfunded for whatever particular reason. So I have looked at it, and first of all, I want to say, this is tough. I don't think any of you would like to be where you are and be up here when we're starting to look at these numbers. It's not a lot of money, and we have to make sure that we get the best return on our investment for the community. So be it said that I appreciate the efforts and energy of every one of these organizations. However, that said, the real use of lodger's tax is to bring people into your community, hopefully hold them in your community overnight, so they will put a head in the bed, and then they will go out to eat and go to our shops, et cetera, et cetera. So some of the organizations that I looked at produce a lot of events, but they're an hour to 2 hour events, and I really question how many people are going to travel a great distance to come in to listen to a presentation for an hour and a half, 2 hours. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but what I'm saying is are those the type of events that we want to support as compared to an event that lasts for 2 days, for example, that brings people in here and we know they're sleeping in here? So what I have come up with is the Chamber of Commerce for $11,000, the Friends of Elephant Butte Lake for $700. Now we've got $300 available if we go that route. The Geronimo Springs Museum from $10,000 down to $9,000. Now we have $1,300. Main Street, okay, the twirl is absolutely, because if you read the background information, we do stand an opportunity and a possibility of getting that event every other year, and you know they're going to be here overnight. That's the type of event in my humble opinion, we've got to support and help finance. The Art Council, I did have the same question that Commissioner Clark had about that, so I took it upon myself to call Jagger, the president, and yes, they have spent a lot of money, and I said, well, what are you holding back for? You know, get the city the bills. Why drop all those bills on someone's desk 5 days before we're trying to close our books? He apologized. I said, you know, why should we even talk about your $3,000 if you haven't spent the $3,000 from last year? And that's the answer that I got. Fiesta, I would like to put back to $4,000. They did a phenomenal job this year, I thought, with $4,000, and that's $500. And I would like to take that $1,800 and add it to the Veterans Memorial Park and Museum, bringing them back up to $4,300, which is at least what they got last year. That would be my suggestion.
Mayor, what was your recommendation for the Art Council once again?
The Art Council, I left at $3,000. I mean, to Commissioner Heschler's point, and I agree with him, we asked our advisory boards to really do the deep research, and maybe as we move forward for next year, maybe we might want to entertain the idea of having a workshop between the City Commission and the Lodgers Tax Board, so they understand what direction we feel we would like to have the community move in relationship to tourism and what we're going to fund and the things we're looking for. Because right now, they're kind of operating blind. They don't have our input, and I'm not saying we should run roughshod over any board, but I think it's important that if the board is going to make recommendations to us, they've got to have in the back of their mind, what's our thought process? What are we thinking? And how do we think lodgers tax should be used? So hopefully that answers your question.
In addition to the comment, Mayor, I think next year we should also have a marketing and events coordinator that would help us out that equation.
From you on off the guys here, so absolutely, without a question. I mean, I think that you take a look at some of these items, they're great. We just need more information, you know, $4,000 for print media and not a name of where you got to print doesn't help us whatsoever. It doesn't maximize small amount of money to make big purchases and then have someone, for want of a better word, wheel and deal with the suppliers. And you're talking some bigger numbers than just one person dealing with someone. So hopefully this is, I beg your pardon, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, finish.
Hopefully this is the last year that we will have to go through this very painful and I feel uncomfortable process, because for a couple reasons. Number one, it appears that the recipients don't necessarily listen to what we're talking about up here, and it's the same thing over and over and over again, and I don't feel we're making any progress. I think we have a good vision on where we're going. Now we need the right tools to get there.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
I see that-
think Mayor Pro Tem.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I kind of feel the same that Commissioner Heschler felt, that we do have the Lodgers Tax Board that gives us the recommendations, but also in looking and listening to Mayor Green, I would like to leave the Chamber of Commerce at 11,000, Friends of Elephant Butte, give them 700, leave Geronimo Museum at 10,000, because they do a lot. They're very active and they bring a lot of people to our community. I know in the past they've had some issues that they haven't had the money to fix, the air conditioning and stuff like that. So I think that the 10,000 that was recommended by the Lodgers Tax Board would suffice. Main Street at 12, the Twirlers at 2, Sierra Arts at 3, Fiesta at 4,000, and then increase the Veterans Memorial wall to 3,300. 3,300. And that's my recommendation.
Okay, we have a recommendation by Mayor Pro Tem. I'd just like to point out, Mayor Pro Tem, that lodgers tax can't be used for air conditioning and things such.
Well, I know, but
No, I understand.
I'm just putting that out there, that there are things other than, you know, there are other expenses out there that are incurred by the museums that lodgers tax doesn't pay for. So, you know, I mean, they do a lot for our community and they bring a lot of people, and they also have a lot of events, as well as Main Street and the Chambers. So I think we need to not cut them in their funding.
Anyone else? Commissioner Friend.
I'm really comfortable with most of these numbers. I would just like to go on record talking about the museum for a moment. For a lot of these applications, it's very hard to track the number of attendees for an event, if they're just in the street or a parade. But I would expect that from the museum, you'd have very, very accurate numbers of attendees, because you pay to get in. You're right there at the door. So on their application, I would hope for in the future that would be a very, very specific number of attendees for it, and not an approximate number. Of all the different groups that are applying for funds, they're the one group that has an admission fee at the door and the ability to track every single person that comes to the museum. So I would encourage the museum to have really accurate figures in their reporting of attendees for the next year. Besides that, I'm really comfortable in line with the recommendations of the Lodgers Tax Advisory Board, minus adjustments to the Veterans Memorial Park and the Chamber of Commerce.
Commissioner Clark?
Are we writing down numbers and you're going to take an average on this? How are you going to do this?
Let's just have a discussion first.
Well, Commissioner Heschler said something that I had made a note to myself up here, and that is that this year, once we get this tourist director found and hired, that the largest recipients of these monies, which was Chamber, Main Street Tourism, and Geronimo Springs Museum, work in tandem with our new tourist director. So by the time next year comes, we've got all of this focusing in a more streamlined direction. I am still concerned about if we need those visitors guides printed, how we're going to get them printed if the chamber is $5,000 short. I'm willing to go along with the Lodgers Tax Board, with the exception of those two comments, but I think the Veterans Memorial Park needs more money, and I think it's very critical that we keep that asset in our minds. And I do question the unspent monies that have been allocated to a couple of these other organizations, whether they're spent now at the end. I know that when Geronimo Springs Museum is here, they could tell us if they've spent that $8,200, or if Main Street has spent that $9,000 that hadn't been spent by April. That might change my mind a little bit.
Okay. I think we're going to be hearing from, unfortunately, the museum is on schedule under new business. But since we do have questions and we do have some representatives in the audience, Marilyn, could you address Commissioner Clark's concern about what appears to be unspent allocation of this current year, please?
It's been spent.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can sit down.
That's it. That's all I wanted to hear.
Thank you. That's it. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you. Linda, could you?
Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Then I will concede to the Lodgers Tax Board if we can make the adjustment to make sure that the Veterans Park has a few more dollars.
Okay. All right. Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead, would you like to make that motion, since we all seem to be falling in line behind your suggestion?
Okay, I move to approve the Lodgers tax allocations, allotting the Chamber of Commerce $11,000, the Friends of Elephant Butte Lake $700, Geronimo Springs Museum $10,000, Main Street Truth or Consequences $12,000, the Sierra Twirlers $2,000, Sierra County Arts Council $3,000, TRC Fiesta $4,000, and Veterans Memorial Park and Museum $3,300.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second.
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner Frankel. Is there any further discussion? I would just like to point out that next year, if we have a tourism director and marketer, special events coordinator, that this will be handled totally differently. But if for some particular reason that does not happen, that we have got to impress on the recipients of this free money that they turn in bills on a timely fashion so that staff is not inundated. I understand Fiesta's in May, I get it. But to hold on to bills that are incurred in January or February, and we're now in May and still have not turned them in, is absolutely nonsensical in my mind, and it just puts additional pressure on staff that's unneeded, unnecessary, and uncalled for. So that's my rant for the day. Okay, seeing no further discussion, can we have a motion? We have a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
The next item is I-2, discussion action appointment to the governing board of the Sierra Vista Hospital. Ms. Cathy, Deputy Clerk, please.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. The clerk's office advertised this opening April 12th and April 14th. We received one application. Back then, it was postponed from the last meeting, and we did publish one more time on Friday, May 19th, also asking for someone with a financial background. At this, since that time, we've had 2 other resignations for the other 2 city members, and attached in your packet you have the one application that we received from Peggy Cookie Johnson. So with that, I'll leave it open for discussion.
Thank you. Quite an impressive resume as far as I'm concerned, and certainly she has been a mayor pro tem, served on the JPC board, and what I'm interested in the resume is New Mexico Municipal League Finance Committee member and New Mexico Municipal League Budget Committee member, and obviously being a city commissioner and being a mayor, she has dealt with finances, knows how to read the spreadsheets, understands different forms of accounting, and I think she would be a great asset, bless someone, to represent the city of TRC on the governing board. And I would like to suggest that she be nominated to serve at the 3-year term that is being vacated by Zenith Baker. And first, I certainly want to thank Warren Cross, who was the governing body's chair representing TRC, and Reverend James Hunt, who was also representing TRC on the governing board. I wanted to thank them for their service to our city, our citizens, our community, as 40% owners of the hospital. I certainly appreciate all the effort and energy that was involved in them doing the job as a board member, and now we just move on. So I'm going to make a motion that we appoint for a 3-year term past Mayor Cookie Johnson to represent the city on the governing board of the Sierra Vista Hospital.
I second that motion.
I have a second by Mayor Pro Tem. Are there any further comments, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. We have 2 more positions. I would just like for your thought process, and these, I'm going to say the first word is temporary. We heard it from Mr. Hudon, and you're hearing it from me. But at the present time, I think that's important that the city fills out his 3 seats on that governing board, and that we have people who have gone to the governing board meetings in the past, understand the operation, understand what the governing board's function is, and has a financial background as well. So on that line, on that vein, I would like to ask Manager Fuentes if he would be comfortable on a temporary basis to fill one of those 2 chairs on the governing board.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Therefore, I would like to nominate City Manager Juan Fuentes to serve as our 2nd representative on the governing board for a temporary period of time, and then we will move forward to advertise for these 2 open positions, knowing that they are just strictly temporary. So let's deal with the first one first. I nominate and move for Manager Fuentes to serve on the governing board representing the city of Truth and Consequences. Do I have a second?
Mayor, you have a second if you'll amend that nomination.
Sure.
To being a temporary position.
I beg your pardon. Yeah, I did say that originally, but I didn't put it in my motion. Yes, absolutely, for a temporary period of time.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask, what is temporary?
temporary, in this particular case, until I believe the time spent by the city manager in this particular case is no longer needed on the governing board, and that he feels comfortable in stepping down, and that the city would be well served by having someone else. As the manager pointed, or someone said it before, we pledge a quarter of our 1% of our GRT to the hospital. It's up around probably $300,000. And heretofore, that money has been used for the operation of the hospital, and we all voted to take that GRT, swing it to the left or to the right, either way you want to go, and use to turn down the debt, to pay down the debt of the $32 million or the $30 million that has been borrowed. If something should go south, and I'm not saying it is, I'm not going to say the world stops spinning and this is not Henny Penny, the sky's falling, but there's always the but in life. We're going to be on the hook for 40% of $30 million, and if I do my math correctly, that's $12,800,000. And I want someone who has a financial background and whose loyalty is to the city of Truth or Consequences, and whose loyalty is to the citizens of this community, and whose loyalty is to the five of us representing this commission on that board at this particular time.
And Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, if I may, and I think it's also important to note that the city of Elephant Butte has appointed in a similar fashion the city manager, Yolanda Lucero. And I think the mayor and the council recognized the need for that temporary appointment because of some of the issues that need to be addressed. And I believe, you know, some discussions were held during one of our JPC meetings, closed session. And again, that's, you know, so it goes in line with what the mindset is of some of the other entities. And the intent, let me make it very clear, the intent is not for any of those appointments, in my opinion, and what I've discussed with those, the city manager in Elephant Butte and the county manager and others, that the intent is not to be a long term. The intent is to make sure that we address some of the issues and to make sure that our interest in the financial debt that we
Shut that
have
off, please.
is protected.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, my understanding is that members to a board are appointed by the city commission. And the longevity of that is determined by the commission, not by the city manager. And so the wording that I heard on an answer to you, that it would be the manager's determination whether or not it was time for him to step down off of that position, I don't believe is really accurate. What I'd like to suggest is that that we continue looking to fill the two positions with some strenuous activity, and with the city manager's conversation and dialogue with us, that it is understood, because we will now be able to have him in an executive session, which I think is extremely important to have more than just Ms. Johnson, but that is the determination of the commission as to when Mr. Fuentes would be taken off the temporary position. But it would also be with his being able to give us accurate information as to what's, you know, what needs to be done on that particular position. I don't mean to jump the gun. I just don't think that Mr. Fuentes is the person to determine who and how long a person should be on the board. I don't want to put him in a predicament with that. Thank you.
Any other concerns or comments?
Excuse me, Mayor, am I correct?
It makes sense, I understand.
Okay.
And to your point, Commissioner Hawk, I think it goes without saying, but I'm glad you said it, that I said someone who has their loyalty to this commission, who will report back to us. We're not going to know when the time is right, because we're not in those executive session meetings. We will be informed, and then we will move forward, so absolutely. So I make a motion to appoint on a temporary basis, I think I changed that, City Manager Juan Fuentes to serve the commission as a representative on the Sierra Vista Hospital Governing Board.
I second that motion.
I have a second by Commissioner Heschler, one of the two. Any further discussions?
Do we want to define temporary back to when the board and the manager feel that a new person can step in?
If I may, Mary, once we have a suitable candidate that we would vote on, that would be able to take one's position or Manager Fuentes' position, then we should do so, and that would then allow.
Free our manager back up to
Our
do the
manager
other
to
things
step
that we
down.
need. I like the way that's worded.
Okay, fine. So I will change my motion to read what you just said, and I'm assuming you will second that, since you changed it.
That's right.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. It carries 4-1. Okay, we have one more position available. I don't think that we have received any, Madam Clerk, have we received anything lately, last day or 2 days, of any other person expressing an interest to serve on the board? Okay. With that said, I do not want to leave an empty chair, because by leaving an empty chair, it devalues our ownership in that hospital, and we lose a voice. As you all know, CUC has 3 chairs, Sierra County has 3 chairs, Elephant Butte has 2, Williamsburg has 1. So Williamsburg owns 5%, Elephant Butte owns 15%. By only filling 2 chairs, we have the same voice as Elephant Butte. With no disrespect to Elephant Butte, but we contribute more, and we have more on the hook than any other community except the county. So seeing no other person who has stepped up presently, I would like to put the same codicil that Commissioner Heschler and Commissioner Clark were talking about in relationship, so this is not open-ended forever. I would like the commission to consider appointing County Manager Bruce Swingle to be on the governing board. He has been attending the governing board meetings. I believe he's been allowed to, correct me if I'm wrong, Manager Fuentes, to go into executive session. He's been allowed to go into executive session, so he understands what the hospital is all about. There is no downtime, there is no training time. He has actually been on the board when I think there was a vacancy from the county. And I would, rather than leaving an empty chair, I would like to ask the commission to consider my nomination, which I will make right now, of Bruce Swingle to serve on the governing board of the Sierra Vista Hospital as the 3rd temporary appointee of the city of TRC.
Second that.
I have a motion and a second by Commissioner Frankel. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a comment that I am voting in favor. When I vote in favor of these, I'm voting in favor of them with the idea that these are temporary positions and that we very strongly look for representatives for those 2 positions. You know, we have a county manager that does a great job, and we have a city manager that has a lot of responsibility. And so we need to find someone other than these 2 individuals that can take on the reins and be the strong advocate for us with the hospital. And so, again, I just want to make sure that people understand that this is a temporary appointment only. Thank you.
Quite well said. Any other concerns?
No, I'd like to echo Mayor Pro Tem's comments.
Yep. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item is new business, discussion action, request for payment. Madam Clerk, you'll please notify the hospital, the governing board, Greg Demore, who is now chairman of the governing board. And we get you this information. Oh, great, thank you. Thank you, appreciate that. Request for payment of the third quarter recipient grant by Geronimo Springs Museum, Maryland Hope.
First, I'd like to thank you for your comments and Josh, especially what you said about the numbers on. I had done that with one thing, but I think one of the things that Steve had asked me to put in, and no one mentioned that page, so perhaps we can. I think that the thing that was missing here was we're talking about the city talking to the Lodgers Tax Commission, the Lodgers Tax Board talking to us. The thing that seems to be missing is the city commission and us talking. So maybe this would help sometimes when you have questions and so on, because there's several times I thought of things. This is the first time that we have asked for a payment that we did not receive. One other time, it was turned in a couple of days late, and that was there was a death of a board member, which was a good friend of all of us. And when I found out that I was late, I said, don't worry about it, because we ate that one. That was our fault. It was my fault. That was the last thing on my mind that week. But this time, I took the, I think I took the papers in. The papers that I think you have in your packet are 4 papers. The first one was stamped, the first one wasn't, the second one was, the third one wasn't, and the fourth one was. So I don't know who made a mistake, if it was me, if it was somebody at the city. Like I said to Renee, I think it makes it hard for everybody when we are supposed to take things to one office and then you're not there. It's the same thing at the museum or any place, and you take it someplace else and someplace else, and every time you have another step, why, there's another chance for somebody to make a mistake, including me. But we would like consideration in that payment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a
Questions?
question. I have a question.
Sure.
I'm looking at the subrecipient quarterly report that says received April 11th. My understanding third quarter is January, February, March. If it's received April 11th and it's due on the 15th, why are we having this discussion?
Oh, because the first page isn't stamped.
But this one's stamped.
No, I think
Was
Commissioner
it sent back?
If I'm, and correct me, Marilyn, if I'm wrong, I think there are 2 different documents you're talking about.
There's the, we send in a request, and I always put that one together first.
But this is
and then
that's the application to be on the city commission agenda. The application
Okay, the second page.
for the $875
Your
was
second page.
received in the correct timing.
Yeah, but see, I think, Commissioner Clark, if I might, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there are 2 documents you're talking about. One is a report of this is how we spent the money. This is what we've done with your money. The next document is the request for payment. And that, I believe, happened where maybe the city offices might have been closed or something.
I don't
think
know.
it was over a holiday, it was stamped, it was not stamped. And I think that might be the confusion.
It might have been a case of where I laid the papers on the counter and they had 2 of them. I don't know. It's odd to me that the one in the middle wasn't stamped, so I don't know what happened. And on these reports, I just learned from Linda that I don't have to do 2 reports, which I have been doing. I have been doing a narrative and a page with figures.
So, Mayor, you're talking about the subrecipient invoice?
Yes.
That
Yes.
doesn't have the stamp on it, but the other 2 were stamped?
Right.
So if they were stamped, why wasn't it sent back to her saying it's not complete?
Can't answer that question. I don't handle the paperwork. I mean, I think, frankly, let's face it, fiscal year 2017, 2018 starts July 1. This commission, because we have had some blips in the past on reimbursements and people getting late, et cetera, I think it's clearly spelled out that if you're late moving, this is next fiscal year, that if you're late, that's it. And if you're late on a quarterly draw, that you would lose 50% of your quarterly draw, and that was voted on by the commission. If my memory serves me correctly, that was unanimous. So since whether there's a mistake made here or not, I'm going to suggest, since we have been very lenient this year on some of the other whoopses that happened, I'm going to make a motion that we authorize staff to pay the third quarter subrecipient grant of $875 to Geronimo Springs Museum. And I just want to reiterate that it is the responsibility of the entity that we are giving the money to make sure that it is received in a timely fashion, and if it's supposed to be stamped, stand there and make sure you see it stamped, because there's not going to be, as far as I'm concerned, and with the commission's vote, there is not going to be, well, we did it once before, let's do it once again. That's not going to happen next year from what
We've never done it
you
before.
can understand. So I make a motion to reimburse the $875.
I second that
I have a
motion.
motion, a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is discussion, action, appointment to the Impact Fee Board, Clerk Nash.
I apologize, I thought I was done for this meeting. Ordinance 679 created the Impact Fee Board, was adopted on April 25th. Publication has been out for 3 weeks. We received one application for the 2 positions that are open from Sydney Bryan, who is interested in serving. There's going to be one additional vacancy for which we're still accepting applications, and we already discussed sending the publication out one more time. With that, I will open it to the commission for any questions or an appointment of a new member to our brand new board.
Thank you. Any questions, concerns, comments, ideas?
I have a legal question.
Legal question, Attorney Rubin.
Attorney Rubin, my understanding is this Impact Fee Board was developed back in the 2000s, and that there was never an Impact Fee Board put into place to oversee the funds that were being brought in or charged to entities that were under construction, and that if we are putting an Impact Fee Board together today with funds that we've been collecting for over 10 years, are we violating some particular issue with ourselves? If we were supposed to form the board to oversee this funding, and the funding is existing in an account, but we've never had that board, and we're doing it now, can we put the funds underneath that board? Is it too late? How long was that board supposed to be in place before we're putting one together now? There's too many questions on this one for me to feel comfortable with.
Wait, didn't we pass the ordinance for the Impact Fee Board? That was more recent.
I think the original one was back in 2006 or 2007.
Oh, was it that long ago?
Yes.
Well, I still want you to move forward. I mean, the fact that we haven't done it doesn't mean we should appoint somebody. I guess your question regarding the work we did to finance the accumulated the last 10 years, if that's what you're asking me, I would like to take a look at that. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I just don't want us to get in trouble if those funds were supposed to have been overseen prior to today's date. Or if we put an Impact Fee Board in today, is it from things into the future coming into us, or can we retroactively put those funds underneath this board? And I think it's important to read what was the original wording of that Impact Fee Board creation that never really got created.
Sure.
And the reason I'm saying this is because I listened to Mr. Ashbaugh many, many times, and whether or not he's correct, I don't think we've done due diligence in our research.
Manager Fuentes.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. The ordinance, the original ordinance, did create an Impact Fee Board, and that Impact Fee Board was identified as the Public Utility Advisory Board.
In the resolution?
In the ordinance.
In the ordinance.
In the ordinance.
It did say that it was the PUAB was the Impact Fee Board?
That is correct. When we amended.
Do you have it?
It's in the code book. We amended the ordinance, I believe. What meeting did we amend the ordinance for the Impact Fee Board?
April 25th?
April 25th. I believe I have the packet for April 25th. Let me just bear with me, because we added 2 members to the impact fee board under that section. And as far as the legalities, John Appel has been working with staff on this matter. So, Jay does not have a lot of that background of what we've been working with. But John will be at our Public Utility Advisory Board meeting, at our first impact fee meeting, to address some of those concerns. What section, what would that be, Renee?
In the code, it's section, you're talking about the one.
Oh, so I
that was
believe
in
it's number
place
1,
before?
it's H1. I'm trying to get the proposed ordinance.
Proposed ordinance should be attached to your agenda packet for today.
Here we go. So here is the section of the ordinance, and this is the chapter in which the development impact fee is in. So section 4-421, which is within the development impact fee ordinance, used to call it advisory board comments. And this is, everything that's underlined in red is what we added, but everything that was in dark is the Public Utility Advisory Board established by city shall file written. So they were identified as the impact fee board. So in trying to clarify all of these things, these issues, and working with John Appel and staff, we decided to make it very clear this was identified as impact fee board in comments, took out the word advisory because that was a little bit confusing, and added the 2 additional members. So the board was already created because it is required by law. And the fees that have been assessed have been some of those projects that were identified in the plan that was developed back in 2007 have been spent by the water or wastewater fund, but they have never been reimbursed to the city or to those funds. So the city has been doing all of these projects that fall within the impact fees, but never been reimbursed. So now that we're getting everything kind of lined up, and we have 2 new members being, hopefully, we had to amend the section of the code to make sure we had the right makeup. Now we're going to be meeting the board, because one is to submit a request for reimbursement to the water and wastewater, which they need those funds for the improvements that they're making right now. So hopefully that answers your question, that the board was created within the ordinance.
But it wasn't in the proper composition of the type of people that are supposed to be on the board?
Well, that was when we looked at it closer, that was the issue. It wasn't, that the current makeup of the Public Utility Advisory Board did not necessarily fit the makeup of because it was 5 people representing 2 different boards. The makeup of the PUAB is different than the makeup of the impact fee board. So the city has always been just appointing PUAB members that meets the PUAB criteria.
So we haven't really been following the impact fee
Well,
board.
the only issue was the makeup of the board, and this is what we were trying to kind of sort out, and that's why they expanded to 2 new members. But it's always been, the board has always.
There's lots of money involved in this, and probably some very angry people, and I would sure hate to have to do something that is not going to be really clear. My preference would be to have City Attorney Rubin have a good chat with Mr. Appel and make certain that, because I think there's $500,000 or more sitting in that impact fee.
And I want to be clear, Commissioners, that the fund that was created was established as a fund where all these impact fees were deposited in there. Along that same fund, the city deposited the Hot Springs Land Development fees, which was about close to $180,000.
Right, and they're asking for them back. Isn't that one of the arguments?
Well, let me finish, because that was one of the bulk of the money was the Hot Springs Land Development fee, and because of the ongoing litigation, we have deposited, according to the proposed settlement agreement, $100,000 into a CD. So now we have just recently received $200,000 from the veterans one, which has been deposited, and those are impact fees that went into that fund as well. And so the fund built up slowly. It wasn't big amounts. The huge amount, the majority of those were from Hot Springs Land Development. So what staff has been working on along with John Appel is to get all these projects lined up. There's going to be a Impact Fee Board meeting next month. John Appel will be present. He will address the board. And if at that time the board feels comfortable, and Jay certainly can be there at that meeting, they will make a recommendation, and then John Appel will be here as well to the commission, because it comes to the commission as well. And I think that will help to clarify, because Mr. Ashbaugh has submitted a letter demanding reimbursement of $11,000. So, I mean, obviously, there's a difference of opinion between what he feels the city should be doing versus what our legal counsel feels our staff, and through their recommendation, feel it should be done. So that at the end of the day, will have to come before the commission, and John Appel will be here before the commission to answer any legal questions along with Jay.
Could we make a motion then to, I mean, I have no problem with Mr. Bryan wanting to be on this Public Utility Board, and I appreciate him reaching out for that. Could we make an appointment for him to be on that board, subject to a conversation between our city attorney and our city attorneys, having looked at the original intent of the ordinance from 2006 and what we've done so far, and make certain that they're confident that we're not creating a mess for ourselves?
I think it's maybe two separate things. I think you could make the motion to appoint Mr. Bryan, and then we can follow up with your second, the issue you've been raising. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Well, I'm okay with doing it that way too.
You want to make a motion on that?
I'll make a motion to put Sid Bryan on the PUAB board that is considered the position for the Impact Fee Board as defined by the ordinance of
679-16/7.
Thank you. With the proviso that we will have clarification on the Impact Fee Board by our lawyers.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Park. I need a second.
I second that motion.
I have a second by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain?
4-1. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mayor, if I can step in for a moment.
Absolutely.
I might want to suggest maybe a 1-minute break. I want to confer either with you and or City Manager Fuentes regarding scheduling. There's something that I need to advise regarding, the time that's going to work between the executive session. So I wonder if we can take a break for a moment.
Okay, absolutely. We will take a break. Actually, why don't we take a 3-minute break and give people an opportunity to walk across the alleyway here if they need to. Okay, we are going to go, I need a motion to come out of,
You need a motion to reconvene and then a motion to go into executive.
that's what I thought. Someone want to
Well,
make those
not a
motions?
motion, I mean, you just
Got it.
reconvene.
Okay, so we are reconvening. Now I need a motion to go into executive session.
Motion to go into executive session?
Could you stipulate what we're doing?
For 10-15-187, threatened or pending litigation.
Okay, we're going under threat and pending litigation. You got it. Okay. So we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Honorable Steve Reed?
Yes.
Honorable Sandra
Yes.
Wyatt? Honorable Ralph Esler?
Yes.
Honorable Kathy Clark?
She's recused.
Has recused herself.
Right.
Honorable Joshua Brady?
Yes.
Okay, we are now in executive session.
The reason why I had
We can't make a motion in closed session. We're going to have a motion, then we're going to go back into executive session to deal with the second item.
Should I not be here?
Open session. Does anyone want to make a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I move to authorize staff and legal to proceed with an application to protest regarding the Cloverleaf Trust Organization's application number HS 1131 for new appropriation of 400 acre-feet per annum of groundwater from Hot Springs underground water basin.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner Franco. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. to Commissioner Clark. I will now need a motion to go back into executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I move to go into executive session under I-1, purchase, acquisition, or disposal of real property, 714 Copper Street, pursuant to 1015-1H8.
I have a motion. Do I need a second? Second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Roll call.
Roll call, excuse me. Sorry.
Honorable Steve Green?
Yes.
Honorable Sandra Whitehead?
Yes.
Honorable Ralph Eschler?
Yes.
Honorable Kathy Clark?
Yes.
Honorable Joshua Franco?
Yes. We are now in executive session. Juan or Robbie, who's going to be because I'd like to make a motion.
Well, I think we should tell the public that we're back open.
Sure.
We're ready to take action.
We're just not used to having anybody waiting out there after executive session.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be vague action.
Right.
What are we doing?
We apologize for the inconvenience to those who have stuck it through to the end. I apologize for that. We had to make a phone call and someone had to leave at 12 o'clock. So back now in open session, is there anyone who would like to make a motion pertaining to what we were in executive session about?
Mr. Mayor, we want to certify what was discussed in executive session.
Okay, I'd like to stipulate that we discuss purchase, acquisition, or disposal of real property, 714 Copper Street, pursuant to 10/15/1H, parentheses, H.8. Discussion incurred and no vote was taken. We are now back in open session.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to authorize staff and legal to proceed with the easement at 714 Copper Street, which,
Yeah, that's fine.
is that it?
So I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second.
Second?
I have a second by Commissioner Frankel. Is there any further discussion on that item?
Does it need to have the ditch wording in there? That it's the, Robbie?
I don't.
That it's pursuant, it's the concrete drainage ditch easement?
That's fine. Yeah, the easement at 14 Copper, which references a concrete drainage structure.
Okay, so I move to have staff and legal proceed with the property at the easement at 714 Copper Street, which references the concrete drainage structure on that location.
I have an amended motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second. Second by Commissioner Frankel. Any further discussion? Seeing none, can we have roll call, please?
Honorable Steve Green?
Yes.
Honorable Sandra Whitehead?
Yes.
Honorable Ralph Eschler?
Yes.
Honorable Kathy Clark?
Yes.
Honorable Joshua Franco?
Yes.
Carries unanimously. Thank you. Continuing, we did appointed Sid Bryant. Now we're, Tracy has stuck it through. J3, discussion action, I owe you a lunch. Application with the USDA Rural Development for financial assistance for water system improvements, Phase 1, Cook Street Treatment Facility, Grants Projects Coordinator. Presenter is Tracy Burnett.
Good, almost morning, a little bit late now. Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners. This application will address Phase 1 of our water system improvements. It'll specifically address the Cook Street Treatment Facility. Phase 1 is a new tank, new chlorination system, and upgrades to our SCADA system. And I provided all the background info within your packet, and I can stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I do have one, Tracy. If we are successful in this, do we have to do the same thing that we did with our wastewater treatment plant fees to make sure that the fees that we're going to charge, the fees that we are charging, are sufficient enough to pay back this debt?
Yes, part of USDA's requirement will be a water rate study.
Okay, and whose dime is that on?
That's through our CAC.
Okay, thank you. So that way going.
And just for clarification, I think when you asked me whose dime, any cost on that is rolled into the loan.
Yeah.
the cost of the study is rolled into the loan.
Right, okay.
Oh,
So
my,
it's
my,
not-
I wasn't
it's
there
not
at the
a free
beginning of
study.
the
No,
wastewater
someone's
study,
paying
so.
money for it. Okay. And then therefore, I'm assuming that this starts this whole process.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. That's all the questions that I had. Any questions, concerns from the commission? I will then entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of application with the USDA Rural Development for financial assistance for water system improvements, Phase 1, Cook Street Treatment Facility, as presented and noted by Tracy Burnett, our Grant Projects Coordinator.
I have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Whitehead. I need a second.
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner Clark. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none or seeing none, please, if you're in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Discussion action, J4, MOU between Western New Mexico University and City of Truth and Consequences. Manager Fuentes.
If you want to take one, pass it along. Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, so this is the MOU that Representative Dow and myself with Manager Swingle have been working on to try to have the Gardner Learning Center continue to be used for classes with Western New Mexico University. And it is important to note that this is going to be one of probably other MOUs for using this facility for adult education, for classes with at Western New Mexico University, and potentially with other partners. So the memorandum before you first is between the Western New Mexico and the City of TRC. And what I passed are just two small changes that were recommended by the university. Under item 2, they deleted equipment and they will provide, so it reads, provide technical support for ITV's courses. And under item 5, delete on-site. Because they do a lot of registration online, there's no need to have on-site registration. So those are the only two changes. And like I said, there's other MOUs that will be forthcoming to the commission for using this facility and for adult education, university classes and so forth. So we certainly do want to commend Representative Dow for her due diligence and work in helping us kind of put this together. And right now, unfortunately, she's at the special session of the legislature, so that's why she couldn't be here today. And with that, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, I will stand for any questions.
Manager Fuentes, define equipment. Is that computer equipment that we would be using only, or was it desks and chairs?
Computer IT
anything else?
equipment.
So it would just be computer. Do we
Yeah.
have something that we can use to put in there ourselves?
Well, again, they are doing some inventorying of that, some other items that they belongs to them, but they are leaving enough where we can still have those courses online. But I mean, they have some ITV, some, I'm not specific on the exact pieces of equipment that they're going to be hauling out versus what they're going to be leaving there.
So it's open-ended?
Yes.
Just definition?
But ultimately, the goal with the university is they are leaving the necessary equipment to be able to have these online classes.
Manager Fuentes, could you address our responsibility? I believe this was discussed when we went out to lunch, four of us, but on B8, provide staff to operate the Gardner Learning Center, which may include, and then it lists two things. Are we addressing, I was led to believe that there are night classes, that adults take the night classes who are working during the day. So who is going to be on the city's dime that we're going to provide someone to help someone there if their computer jams up, or who puts the key in the door, who makes sure no one leaves with things that they shouldn't be leaving with, who puts the key and closes up? I mean, is that going to be our responsibility?
Well, to address the clarification of B8, we already provide custodial and groundskeeping services, as well as some IT.
Right.
As far as just general infrastructure that is there. With some of the other agreements that will be forthcoming, it will address some of those issues of access and being open and all of that stuff. So it's still, we're still working. We're not necessarily committing a paid city employee or staff to be there 8 to so many hours, because that's not the intent. Is we're working with different partners to be able to have this facility available during the hours where classes are being done.
Good, thank you.
And I will say, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, one of the partners is actually Workforce Solutions that has an office here. And we are working with them to relocate them to that building out there and free this space up for other activities here at the Civic Center.
Excellent. Thank you for being here, Gene. Appreciate it.
That's a perfect marriage, actually.
Yeah.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? All right, then
Mayor, I make a motion that we
Absolutely.
approve the memorandum of understanding between Western New Mexico and the City of Truth and Consequences with the two aforementioned changes, A number 2 and A number 5.
I have a motion by Commissioner Clark. I need a second.
Second.
I have a second by Commissioner Frankel. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. That's what you like to see, when you have a problem that stares you right in the face, you get people in a room, and you come up with a plan, and you make it happen, and you save something, and you move forward. So congratulations to all those people who were part and parcel of making this not go away from our community. Okay, we are now into K, report, City Manager.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Commissioner, just one quick item. I just want to report to the commission that on Saturday's rodeo ribbon cutting ceremony, I mean, it was well attended, it was a great event. The rodeo arena looks 100 times better, and I think everybody was very pleased and happy with some of the improvements that were done out there. A lot of horses, a lot of participants, a lot of hopefully GRT, because they do quite. I mean, those trailers, horses, and they haul a lot. Expensive equipment in. So it was a great event, those 2 days, and hopefully, again, as I stated during the budget, we'll make some more, we'll continue to partner with the county to make more improvements at the rodeo arena. Thank you.
Excellent. City Attorney.
I have no report, thank you.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
All I would like to do is say thank you again to all our law enforcement, City of TRC, State Police, Sheriff, Border Patrol, Animal Control, everyone. Thank you. You all do a great job, and you're in our thoughts and prayers at all times that you're on our streets. Thank you.
Nicely said. Thank you. Mr. Hester. Mr. Clark.
No report.
Mr. Franklin.
I just want to announce that for the next meeting on the 14th, I've invited Van Clothier to come and give a presentation on some water harvesting collection that we've got proposed for Vote Street. And then later on that meeting, I'm going to be asking for a vote action item on that presentation. Second little thing I want to mention is just a little feedback I got from some residents in town concerning light pollution. This is going to be at City Hall on our flag at night. We've got the flag, it's lit at night, but it appears that the spotlight may be off, so it's no longer pointing at the flag, it's just pointing out into the town. And so if that could get addressed, the citizens of the town would appreciate it, and that's all I have.
Excellent. Well, I think it's all been said already. The rodeo, I think this is just a first moving forward. There was a gentleman there who is what they call a rough stock handler, who was very, very impressed. And before would not even look at City of TRC and our arena as a venue place. I reached out to Commissioner Vice Chair Lunar on Monday and spoke to her to get the good and the bad about the rodeo, and it was all good. All they had was one little malfunction on a tractor and some duct tape and baling wire, and you know what farmers do, you just keep on plowing. So it was really great, and to Manager Fuentes' point, I think this is a pond that we can swim well in to showcase our community and our assets and develop GRT. We will be going up, we had a meeting with the rodeo manager for Socorro scheduled, and he had to cancel, so we'll be going up there in June to take a look at their facility and to see if we can work a little bit closer with Socorro and have them ship down some of the events that they have this week, that maybe the next week will come down here. And just talking about rodeo, New Mexico Magazine, May, two things I want to bring to your attention. The back page, Legacy, May 1960, the year of the cowboy, photographed. A young cowboy keeps an eye on the rodeo action during the 2013 Truth or Consequences Fiesta. This year's event is May 5th through the 7th with a parade, live music, and a Sierra County Sheriff's Posse Rough Stock Rodeo. But what I was really thrilled about, and I just want to let you know, is that we had a writer who was living in T or C many years ago. His family owned a business on Broadway, who spent a day in town and realized that the day did not give our community justice. You couldn't do it in one day. He came back a month later for 2 days, stayed overnight, brought a photographer from Silver City. We had lunch with him again at Latitude 33, and in the next month's issue, it's going to say 25 things to love about Truth or Consequences. And I've reached out to Dave Herndon, who is the editor of the New Mexico Magazine, to ask him if we could have access to that article and put it up on our tourism website and our city website as well. And he has not gotten back to me yet. I'm quite sure he will say yes if we give proper credit where the article comes from, et cetera, et cetera. So that will be June, New Mexico. I think that should give the city a little bit of a hit when maybe our spas and some of the other activities kind of slow down a little bit and it's directed more over towards the lake. This is very encompassing, and all those citizens and those businesses who allowed us to go in and be interviewed, and he didn't want anything set up, so I basically just met him and he said, you just turn me loose. And he was turned loose and he did his own thing. So I'm really anxious to see the article. Hopefully it will be what we anticipated being. And that is the end of my report. I wish my fellow commissioners and staff very happy holiday, and staff enjoy the 3-day vacation, well earned. Seeing no other business, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We're out of here. Thank you.